Hello, everybody. Hope everyone is having a wonderful Wednesday wherever you are in the world, whether you are here on the East Coast like me or you're somewhere else exciting and wonderful, whether that's LA or London. I know we've got a community from all across the globe. I'm Avery Agnini, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Vayner, and I'm absolutely pumped to be hosting our Super Bowl sort of preview. We've done a lot of work and content around what we've done in the post game, but this year we wanted to get into the preseason of planning for Super Bowl. Whether you are a brand who is new to Super Bowl or you have done many Super Bowls, we've got some really interesting stuff for you. I'm going to be joined by Sean Walsh and Conor Skea from our business development team. They're going to show some really cool things that we've been working on. What is up, gents? How's it going?
Hello. Happy to be here.
We are so pumped to have you both joining us on VaynerX's channels. Sean, let's start by introducing you a little bit. Tell our audience a bit about Sean.
Yeah, great to be here. Thrilled to see everybody, the global crew we have. I'm Sean Walsh. I help lead global business development at VaynerX. Been in the Vayner fam for just about 5 years. Have seen some of the coolest, most innovative approaches we have to Super Bowl, and thrilled to spend some time unpacking those with you all. And yeah, excited to be here. Conor,
and how about you, Conor? My two Irish gentlemen.
Two Irish gentlemen. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here. We're talking about the big game today. Conor Skea, I work on the business development team alongside Sean, based in New York City. Been here for 3 years and really predominantly working on the North America side of the business. But really excited to be chatting with everyone today from a global perspective.
Yeah, and if you are someone who is not yet working with us and you're like, hey, I'm curious, what do you guys do? Conor and Sean are your guys. So hit them up on LinkedIn, hit them up on email, whatever it is. But today we're here to talk about Super Bowl. In this season, when everyone's like, is it back to school? No. At Vayner, it's back to Super Bowl. So I'm going to hand it over to you guys. Throw any comments in the chat. Send this link out to your friends, to your family, to your people who love Super Bowl. This will be recorded and also shared out afterwards. So I always love to see the views climbing. But if you're watching live, drop any questions in the chat and welcome up Sean and Conor.
Amazing. Thanks, Ave. I got to say off the bat, it does pain me a little bit to be talking Super Bowl with Sean. I'm a big NFL fan. We're about halfway through the season, and I'm a Giants fan. The team is not doing so well right now. And Sean is an Eagles fan who took our best player away, and they're looking a lot better than us right now. But I'm excited to dive in on more specifics on how we can help.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
Shall we pull up the deck? Shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Amazing. So today, again, we're talking Super Bowl. I think something that you can think about Vayner Media, VaynerX as a whole, is that social permeates everything that we do, right? We believe that brand is built in social. We believe that it should be the foundation for any marketing strategy for any brand that's Fortune 500 to global upstarts, more up-and-coming challenger brands. With that being said, we think that Super Bowl is the best deal in town outside of just the social realm in general. Gary, we have a quote from Gary here that really speaks to this, that states, in a world where we believe that brand is built in social, as I mentioned, 12 months of running perfect social still can't get you the reach and impact of a perfectly executed Super Bowl spot, right? And think of it like this, right? I'm excited for the Super Bowl coming up. We have Kendrick Lamar hype of he's doing the halftime show. We're thinking about all of the future ads that are going to happen, right? Like, I don't know about anybody else, but the day after the Super Bowl, I'm always looking to see what's ranked the best Super Bowl's ad from the previous Super Bowl, right? And we think of all these big names that have happened, whether it's last year of State Farm, Dunkin' Donuts, or Coinbase. There's maximum impact that could be had during the Super Bowl if done right. And so we know about this because we've done 12 Super Bowl spots in the last 6 years, right? This is something that we live and breathe at Vayner. And we've done it across a number of different categories as well as verticals, right? So we've done planters 4 times, which we're going to dive into a little bit further momentarily, which is a really fun case study to bring to life. We've worked with Sabra Hummus in the past of leaning into influencers and underpriced talent. Most recently, we've worked with Starry and the partnership with iSpace to really capture Gen Z interest. So there's a lot of ways to go about the Super Bowl, right? And this is something that's paramount to a lot of our strategies. And we're starting to plan as of months ago for the Super Bowl, this upcoming Super Bowl in New Orleans in 2025. across a slew of different ways, whether it be us bringing the big spot to life or helping with an activation and a couple of other different pieces that we'll dive into momentarily. And I think why VaynerMedia in particular is referred to as a leader in the space when it comes to building Super Bowl spots and strategies in general. It's not just our ideas that we think about that lead to these spots, and we'll double click into a couple of these ideas that we've brought to life, but really it's this idea of how we can engineer our spots to maximize social reach, right? We think that social reach equals relevance. And in a world where everyone is on their phones while watching the big game, you need to structure your entire game plan to maximize distribution in a social perspective. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Sean. He'll walk through some examples.
Awesome. Thank you, Conor. Connor mentioned, we've done 12 spots in the last several years, which is right up there with the most any agency in the world has done. Back to even some of the, Aldo's quote in the comments, I think it rings totally true that we believe there is outsized value if you actually do the Super Bowl right. Yes, the costs are continuing to go up, but there's not many other places in the world or media executions in the world where you can almost guarantee that you have a captive audience to watch 30-second plus long commercials from brands and actually wait for them, right? And look forward to them. So Planners is a brand we've had the pleasure to work with for several years and have had, several different iterations of really kind of quote unquote winning the Super Bowl. And I think each of them tell a unique and really fun story, all back to Conor's point of almost reverse engineering the activations to be maximally impactful in social, but also using social to inform how we actually go and create the activations themselves. So 2021, we killed Mr. Peanut, an iconic globally recognized, manifestation of the Planners brand. And what we had found prior to that spot was that Mr. Peanut wasn't really relevant, right? And we actually started to discover through social that we really couldn't get people to care much about Mr. Peanut. And this was happening at a time in the world where Jon Snow, for those Game of Thrones fans out there, had recently passed away on screen, leaving a big gap with one of our heroes and people really cared about that. I don't want to ruin any spoilers, but Captain America ends up not making it through the end of, or I should say Iron Man doesn't make it through the end of Avengers, and watching a hero kind of crumble in front. So we took those cues and we said, what would happen? How do we get people to care about Mr. Peanut? Well, he met his untimely demise, as you can see in the small GIF there. But as we'll talk about on the next slide, that execution in 21, I think was a perfect example of really winning to lead up before the game, creating a ton of virality and buzz around what happened to Mr. Peanut. He actually died before the game, which really kind of commandeered the attention landscape leading into the game of what's going to happen to Mr. Peanut. And when he was actually reborn into Baby Nut in that spot, the conversation continued and manifested into kind of this new world, this new but familiar character for Mr. Peanut that our team then actually took and really you watch Mr. Peanut grow back up for the entirety of that calendar year following. So a really big kind of takeaway from that execution was not just having it be about what happens in the game, certainly lead in before and also using that game to influence what happens after, which was a great execution. In 2022, we ignited a Twitter war, which, given the election is next week, we want to stay away from Twitter wars in general.
Wait, Sean, before we get into Twitter wars, also maybe X wars, I feel like one mark of knowing you've made it in culture is making a New Yorker cartoon, which to me was one of the biggest highlights of that Planters era. Is yes, it was on all the late night shows. Yes, it was everywhere, but the New Yorker cartoon was that was the breakthrough. I know you were working closely on that, sort of in the mix at that time. What was your sort of breakthrough moment of the Baby Nut spot?
I mean, I think you can't, I agree with you completely, Abe. You thinking about earned media, the earned media value of a New Yorker cartoon, can't even be quantified.
You've made culture, at least in my microcosm of culture.
Yeah. I mean, as an SNL fan, that continues to be when you actually see your spot, I think it's relatively similar. And also just from an actual cultural impact perspective, seeing the spot referenced and or joked about multiple times on SNL in and around the Super Bowl just made it very clear that we were in the zeitgeist and really kind of figure out how to leverage social insights through a smart execution, a smart pre-game announcement of the spot. I shouldn't even say announcement, unveiling of the idea that we were killing Mr. Peanut really led to us driving and capturing that cultural zeitgeist before the game and after it as well.
I think back to it.
Back to it. Love it. Great call out though in the New Yorker 1/8. The 2022 spot, again, we can kind of go back and watch this, but we ignited a Twitter war, Twitter polling war, and really leaning into some of the platform endemic features like polling in this instance to understand for mixed nuts, which was a really important skew for planners. Do you actually eat your nuts all together in one handful and throw them in the mouth, or do you cherry pick the specific nuts? And we used Joel McHale and Ken Jeong from the cult classic show Community, which was near and dear to my heart, but are individually massive stars in their own rights, to kind of voice over this debate that we really wanted America to lean into. And we saw that again through a commitment to social leading to the game actually led us to this idea well before we actually went and used the dollars to buy the talent and produce the spot. We knew what we were going to go do because there was such an active conversation happening. And we really fanned that flame and again, used really strategic deployments of really big macro influencers, but micro influencers at scale as well to seed this debate in culture. And then I think our execution last year was extremely exciting as well, right? We actually took this concept of a roast, right, which has been gaining popularity. This was even before the roast of Tom Brady took over culture this past year on Netflix. Again, there's a roast comedian in the headlines right now for maybe the wrong reasons at a political rally last week, but we'll sidestep that. This roast for Mr. Peanut was exciting for multiple different reasons. One, we actually deployed what we believed and what again the critics came back and said was a really entertaining kind of like format breaking spot where we actually showed clips of the roast happening in the actual spot itself. But the exciting piece about this one was, again, how do you have to think about Super Bowl using this stage and the massive reach and impact you can drive to spark deeper action or spark deeper engagement? In this case, we actually filmed a 12-minute long actual roast of Mr. Peanut with Jeff Ross and several other really big roasting comedians, and embedded it on Tubi, one of our partners as well, who actually had a massive impact and a massive spot in this game. So we actually were able to get a little bit of a 1+1 here. But that full roast was for view on Tubi and ended up making it organically to Tubi's kind of top tile recommendation screen, which they had never seen before, and drove over 10,000 additional hours of consumption and engagement with this really deep-seated brand content that, again, you just don't typically see from a Super Bowl execution. So Planners is a good encapsulation. Again, we could spend some time talking about the work we've done for Pepsi or with Ice Spice and Starry last year, which really kicked off a year-long kind of program with Starry and that team, which we're super excited about, not to mention some of the work we've done for DraftKings or for Budweiser. But if we go to the next slide, Connor, I think this really encapsulates a little bit more around like, what do we believe the key pillars to winning Super Bowl are, right? The first, if everyone remembers, one of the most impactful brand spots I've seen in the Super Bowl that we didn't have the luxury to work on, but I think that still sticks with me, and I think will probably resonate to a lot of the folks that are listening today, is the Coinbase floating QR code execution. Maybe the simplest Super Bowl ad that's happened in the last 10 years, but I think certainly one of the most immediately resonant because it broke the mold, and we'll talk about breaking the format in number 3. But 2, it literally was the definition of what we refer to as brandformance, leveraging the absolute power and scale of the attention that you can command with a Super Bowl spot with a very clear direct call to action. In this case, a QR code scan to download and create a Coinbase account is maximally impactful. Scott's Miracle Grow is another example of one of the spots we did several years ago that actually had a 1-800 number, or it wasn't a 1-800 number, I apologize. It was a phone number on the bottom of the screen where you could directly text Scott's Miracle Grow to enroll in their SMS program, which captured over 1 million first-party data records for Scott's in the week leading the week after the game, or during the game and the week after, which then allowed Scott's direct access to over 1 million users to remarket to show geographically based deals to, et cetera, right? So that's an idea of really capturing attention, and the creative execution has to be on point to actually win in the moment, but not making the goal 30 seconds of brand impact without having some sort of tie to an action. It's just such low-hanging fruit to us, and we've seen it play out multiple times with brands we've worked on or also brands that, again, we admire that have won the game. Thinking about how to tie it to brand formance or an action, whether it's through a QR code, which is much more endemic to users to think about and activate against now, whether it's leveraging text, whether it's leveraging other kind of immersive formats, et cetera. This idea of brand formance and tying it to performance for your business is a can't miss given how big the scale is. And quite frankly, back to some of the points in the text, how much the cost is of activating in this game, right? It's just it's a must. The second piece here is massive, and Avery had mentioned it, but like surround sound is a concept we think about a lot at Vayner, whether that is a Super Bowl commercial or whether that is your Black Friday campaign or whether that's a new product launch. Leveraging the reality of organic social and the content and the types of content that are resonant with users there. And again, the reality that one singular post on organic social can reach 2 million, 5 million, 10 million people, because we now know that relevant creative actually can drive reach in these channels. It's unbelievably critical to make sure that around your message before, as we talked about in the planners example, certainly during the game with an active, I'm sure if we've worked on Super Bowls, everyone's taken part in their fair share of war rooms, right? Whether on-site, off-site, and certainly after the game. But this concept of surround sound to us also, it's really critically important that what this doesn't mean in today's day and age is, cut downs of the spot or, extremely kind of like matching luggage type executions, but really thoughtful, strategic, creative ways to leverage the voices of micro, mid-tier, macro influencers or creators to really amplify that message through their own voice, right? Through their own context, to their own follower bases, let alone organic creative from the brand itself. That again is there to really spark the conversation and to not only to do that, but to drive insight back into the brand as well. This is an example of some work we were lucky enough to do with the Reese's team last year, where we didn't do the spot, which was a great spot, but we were on the hook to deliver the relevance and the scaled impression volume across social to make sure that that message was resonant, and we were translating it in a way that was really resonant with consumers that cared about Reese's. The third is this idea of breaking the format, right? I think we've, whether it is a roast, whether we are, showing the funeral of a fallen hero, a la Mr. Peanut. The Coinbase example is a great example as well. The Super Bowl is a space, no question about it, for celebrities to show up in every ad. I know there were several ads last year that had a lot of the same celebrities in them. That's going to be the fact. I think where brands have the opportunity to stand out is really thinking through how to break that format, how to think about it in a different way. And we see that is only increasing on a day-over-day basis on the television screen, not to mention on the biggest stage of the year in the Super Bowl. And then the last piece, and we'll talk about this, Conor will talk about this a little bit more on the following slide, but really focusing on underpriced attention for both talent and media buys, right? So clearly, when we talk about the concept of underpriced attention at Vayner, it's really kind of how do we understand the value, or I should say the cost of a media placement or a talent engagement with the actual attention that they're going to deliver, not the potential reach, right? So in this case, again, as we've talked, the cost to get a Super Bowl ad is only increasing year over year, but there are no other buys in the media landscape when you can guarantee and walk up and show up to 200 million plus eyeballs, even probably more than that globally, on an ad for 30 seconds, right? With full attention. The same thing goes to be true with differentiated media platforms and placements that we want to amplify that message against, right? So that's why we care a lot about organic social, where we believe there is underpriced attention to be had. That's why we care about maximizing the impact of underpriced and relevant influencers and creators versus, some of the celebrity talent buys that we see happening in the Super Bowl. One of the key driving factors that Gary, our CEO, talks about all the time when we talk about the value of talent is how much we paid for that specific talent, right? And what did we get out of it versus what did they get out of it? And a lot of times you will see that tier one A-list talent is going to come at a cost that is prohibitive for the brand to even drive any actual impact. Whereas working with strategic underpriced influencers or differentiated groups still can drive brand impact, but can do it in a more efficient way. A great example of this is a spot we did with Sabra several years ago at this point, right at the advent of TikTok, where we had Charli D'Amelio, who was up to that point, had a couple million followers on TikTok, but was nowhere near the global superstar she is today. We actually placed her in a Sabra Super Bowl commercial for pennies on the dollar versus the impact that she was actually able to have on the brand as well. So those are kind of our macro key pillars for winning the Super Bowl. I think Conor will talk through a little bit more when we talk about underpriced attention and give some more context. And then we'll talk about ways that, again, we as Vayner can be helpful to you. If anybody on this call is thinking, oh my God, I have a big spot in the Super Bowl. How can I help? How can Vayner help me maximize impact? I don't have a spot in the Super Bowl, but it's a key time period for me. How can I actually engage in the game? So we'll spend some time there as well.
Thanks, Sean. And to Sean's point, and one of the pillars that we had here, surround sounding any of your strategies is absolutely critical to winning, right? Whether it be you have the spot in the big game or you have an activation on the ground, you have some sort of play from a strategy standpoint for your brand to get involved in the big game, given the amount of eyeballs and attention is there. Here are a couple of ways that we think about this, double clicking from the last slide. The underpriced talent piece seen on the left here is something that we find near and dear to our hearts. At VaynerX, we've actually built out a process for identifying talent that's on the up and up, developing relationships with them so that we can partner with them in the future for any of our brand partners. And a core pillar for these partnerships that we have is ensuring that these folks know how to make for the platforms that they're active on and they have followers, right? It's absolutely critical for any brand. If there's one thing you take away from this, is an understanding that social is the name of the game from a brand building perspective, but understanding the nuances of the platforms, what the algorithms are prioritizing is going to help get you outsized distribution, leaning into platform best practices. So in this example on the left here, one of our partners across VaynerX, Neutral, they had a number of different events around the Super Bowl, right? They were sponsoring different clubs. They had a number of different in-person events that they invited a bunch of folks to. They partnered with 2 DJs based on their cohorts that they were targeting at that point, consumers that were interested in live events, and they did a number of partnerships across the country in more live event settings. These 2 DJs were at an underpriced point in the makeup of how they were contracting. And they were also incredible from a content building standpoint, right? So through a series of posts that they pushed out, among other DJs that we helped contract for this initiative, we were able to increase return on investment by 230% based on the value, right? And resulted in 468,000 incremental impressions. So tapping into this underpriced talent can mean a ton for your business when you think of a 4-week program around the Super Bowl and driving that many impressions. The middle piece here is probably something that's least talked about from a Super Bowl perspective in the space. We're talking about underpriced media buys. Sean alluded to this before, but the buy for the Super Bowl is going up and up year over year, right? And a lot of brands just can't play in that space, which is totally fine. There are ways around it that our team, headed by Hugh Scallon, who is our head of video activation, has found ways around getting and showing up at the big game from a media buy perspective without having to adhere to that large cost that might not be affordable for you at that given time. A couple of ways that we think about this. One, you can think of a localized approach, right? Going from a DMA or a certain part of the country. If you are focused on hitting the southeast of the United States, there are ways that we have relationships that can go out and purchase that media on your behalf at a fraction of the cost of this national buy. There are ways that we can tap into direct partnerships with streaming partners to be able to show up in the game, not on the national broadcast, but for a sliver of the viewership to be had for the big game, but also at a fraction of the cost. In this example here, we worked with Prime Energy last year. And rather than the big national buy, what we did was we worked with the network to buy a pre-kickoff purchase during the national anthem, right? So Prime Energy showed up during the national anthem where we had 70% of viewership, and it was half of the price of the national buy, right? So if you think of the arbitrage there of finding that attention and the eyeballs, but we're getting at half of the cost, it was a huge deal for Prime Energy and helped take off the massive growth that they had during Super Bowl event last year. On the right here is something that I'm so passionate about, and Vayner as a whole is. VaynerX, we have a production company, and also VaynerMedia plays a lot in the space of live events. And we have a rule here. It's called the 1 for 100 rule. So any of one event that you have, you should be creating at minimum 100 social first assets to be leveraging for documenting that event or future marketing purposes. For Fanatics, one of our partners, we started working with them a few years ago. And if we look back to 2022 versus 2023 Super Bowl activations and how we help them increase viewership around a major pillar event for the brand, Fanatics being the brand that helps create all the jerseys that we're watching in the Super Bowl. We created plus 2,000% increase in impressions year over year. And this was with one point of it is 6x the amount of ads based on a lot of this super surround sounding of the events that they had. But also, as you see, the nature of the content that we're creating is really built for the platforms, right? So we're getting outside distribution from an average impression size compared to previous year's efforts. Great. So we're 3 months away from the Super Bowl, which is crazy to say. If you haven't started thinking about your strategy for winning Super Bowl in this big, big game and the big day with a ton of eyeballs, the time is now. As it just represents an immense opportunity, whether you're a Fortune 50 brand, whether you are a challenger brand, just bootstrapping and getting off the ground, there are ways that you can help lean into the attention that this game is getting and help maximize results for your brand through a couple of ways that we just walked through and provide some case studies and thoughts around how we've done it for other brands in the past. But again, the time is now to start thinking about this so you can plan ahead and really come with a foolproof strategy to win the day. And so how we can help? We think of 4 buckets really. But this is the ways that we partner with brands in the past and how we can start a conversation today, tomorrow, next week on how to work with you and understand what are your goals and what are you trying to get out of this? Do you have any brand pillars coming up and reverse engineer around your goals to help set you up for success? From left to right, we can help you from an activation standpoint, right? If you're not showing up in the actual big game, but you have boots on the ground at the actual New Orleans event in 2025 in February this year, we can help you surround sound that activation. We can help anything one-off events that you're having, whether locally or anywhere around the country. That's one pillar that we can help get off the ground sooner than later. And we have a ton of experience doing. Building the actual commercial, whether it be from the big national spot buy or a local spot that I alluded to during the media buy portion I was mentioning, we can help create the actual Super Bowl spot. We made 12 the past 6 years, as I mentioned before. We have a ton of experience here from some leaders within the creative organization. So we're happy to follow up and chat more on that front on how we can help. And on the right here with the integrated campaign, right? This is what we do all the time, right? We're building a Super Bowl spot and we're actually placing the media buy in a really strategic manner, leading into underpriced attention opportunities from a media buy perspective. We help a number of Fortune 100 brands with this over the past few years. And lastly, being surround sound. This is a core pillar that we've been chatting through today on our POV on how to win the day. But using some of the principles that we just walked you through, we're happy to chat through how we can maximize anything that you have existing strategy that you're already building out or you're hoping to build out in the future.
Yeah, Conor, I know so many people have already, shot, they're deep in scripting, but I think the opportunity of surround sound is interesting for almost like any brand, whether you're looking at ways you can participate on social, do a watch party in your region, whatever it is. We'd love to chat and love to help think about how this might make sense. We've got some really cool stuff happening in markets like Mexico for Super Bowl, of course, the US, and even state level. Like that's one thing that I think Hugh has been helping some of our partners crack is like, what does that local Super Bowl activation look like? Because whether you are in, Miami or Minneapolis, people are watching the game and sometimes maybe it might make sense to buy a local spot and lean into that amplification. So guys, I feel like I learned so much in this session. This was amazing. The Super Bowl time is now. And thanks for taking the time, everybody, to join us to hear a little bit about what we're thinking of Super Bowl getting ready for 2025, which is nuts to say, but it's 3 months away. It's going to be here before we know it. And big thanks to Conor and Sean for putting this together.
Absolutely. Thank you, Avery and marketing crew, for having us and setting this all up. And to Avery's point, we are open for questions, follow-ups, whether it's LinkedIn, email. You guys should have our contact information. So we'd love to, whether unofficial or official help for how you're thinking about the Super Bowl, please use us. And we look forward to hearing from you all. Thank you guys for spending some time with us.
Happy Super Bowl season.
Yeah, let's
Thanks
get
so
it.
much, everyone.